So again, thank you for coming. This conversation about Black music and the state of our industry and our involvement and influence in industry has been going on for many years. So this is not the start nor the end of this conversation. But today we want to have some very specific practical conversations around the music business from the lens of Black music creators and industry professionals. Before I get started, I want to see kind of a raise of hand to see who are music creators in the audience. Raise your hand. Okay. And who are on the business or industry side? Oh, okay. I see some double hands too. So some of the conversation we're going to have today is going to be familiar with some of you who are engaged actively in the music business and industry, especially around statistics. And then a lot of it, we really want to have a discourse with the audience. So when I'm running my panels, I want to feel free to ask questions and really contribute to the conversation. So we're going to start with a opening conversation. I'm going to welcome Brennen and Shannon to the stage. All right. No, anyone's fine. Well, and by the way, feel free to come up. We have these tables up here, so we're not talking empty tables. It'd be great if you guys come up. We are streaming this online, so you can also text or post on social media, let people know to tune in to the For the Culture conversation at MLC. They can get information on any of the MLC social channels. We've already posted the online. So we're going to dive into an opening discussion, which I call How Do We Get Here? We're going to talk about kind of the history and where we are in terms of the industry. I'm going to let each of my co-panelists introduce themselves, and we'll get started. So I'm start right in. Brennen.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brennen Boose. I am the Senior Manager of Marketing and Communications at the National Museum of African American Music. Long title, long name, but blessed to be here and excited for this conversation.
Morning, everyone. My name is Shannon Sanders. I am Executive Director Creative here at BMI Nashville, also songwriter, producer, President of Nashville Music Equality. Excited about today's conversations.
And just repeat myself again, I'm the head of third-party partnerships at the Mechanical Licensing Collective. I'm also a professor of music industry at the UCLA Center for Music Innovation, as well as the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music. So just to get started, this conversation is kind of how do we get here? And as we started putting this summit together, I've had a lot of one-on-one conversations with Shannon where we just really dive into history and culture. So I really want to start with, this month's about the appreciation of Black music. So let's start with just the evolution of Black music and where it is today. I think both of you, coming from your perspective as Shannon as a music creator and culture influencer, and Brennen, part of one of the top institutions curating our history and our culture. Just from a genre standpoint, how do we get here?
I think I can start. I mean, I think we got here by the persistence of what I would call Black excellence, continuing to create, continuing to find ways to express ourselves, continuing to find ways to be creative and show and display the love that we have for ourselves, for our community through music. And I think it is in spite of all of the struggles, in spite of all of the contextual roadblocks and things like that, like music has still happened. And it's happened at a huge level for us now to this point where we see, we're getting ready to celebrate 50 years of hip hop, and hip hop rap music is one of the, if not the top genres. So it's beautiful for me. But that's how we've gotten here, kind of that resiliency of our community.
You know, I interpret that question differently. When I think how we got here in terms of genre, I think about the fact that genre was always a construct of labels and radio. Genre means who? Let's be clear, genre means who? So in a lot of ways, you have to think historically. Some of you know I'm part of this movie that comes out this weekend, this Elvis movie, right? And it touches on that. Get a chance to go see it. It's really interesting. You know, Black folks know that Elvis had a very contentious relationship with Black America. A lot of that was around genre because people felt that he was appropriating. But now we can look back at history and put it in context what was happening. This was the first time we saw somebody white cover Black music is what it was. That's all it was. So you have to understand that genre was a construct of radio and labels because they were attempting to market to different audiences because you couldn't invite the same people to the same shows. So why play the same music to the same people, even though it was all American music? It was really all just American music. So genre means who? Country means white. Country meant Southern and white. Blues meant Southern and Black, but it was called race records at the time. So then you fast forward and the blues gets more rhythmic with the invention of the drum kit, which came jazz. Now, in retrospect, the blues gets more rhythmic. Now, you can argue whether R&B means radio blues or rhythm and blues, but R&B, okay, here comes radio. And so the version of the blues that's on radio now that radio is new, is this new rhythmic blues that Black people do. So you had country, because even before that, it was either religious music or not. So of the things that were not religious music, what they marketed to white people would be hillbilly, which evolved into country, and race records. Okay, so now we're fast forwarding. So what do you call it now? Here comes an Elvis. What do you call it when white people want to do Black music? We can't call it Black music. We can't call it race records. So you call it rock and roll. So that's how he became the king of rock and roll. But sidebars, nothing that he ever said himself or claimed to be. That's what they called him because this was the first time. And understand, he had a contentious relationship with white folks too. That was funny. I was talking to a coworker yesterday. She talked about her grandmother used to turn Elvis off. All that wiggling. They went, listen, white folks wasn't with the wiggling. You know, Black folks were doing all that wiggling, all that moving. But he grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, in Memphis, right? So that's what he saw. That's what he knew. But this was the first time that America saw that. So as far as genre goes and how we got here, that's how we got here. And by the same token, that's why even still, hip hop means Black, pop means white, and it continues. The interesting thing about now and DSPs is that mood is overtaking genre. So it really doesn't matter. Whatever your mood is, you know, you create a playlist based on your mood. So that's what's awesome. But that's how we got here to a point where there's genre and there's a distinction in the thing that we call Black music. And I gotta say, you know, it's not urban. We cut that out a couple years ago. We don't call it urban music anymore because urban means city. This music doesn't just happen in an urban setting. It's Black music. You call it what it is. And it's cool. You can be white and do Latin music. You can do Black. You be Black and do Latin music. But you can be white and do Black music. It's cool. Call it what it is. Justin Timberlake, you do Black music. Call it what it is.
I think that's a good point. Where we talked about not only the social construct around music, which, you know, the word social construct is really about creating these silos and creating these categories through which we can then control and place norms and standards around. And we've seen over the years that also shows up in the way that we monetize or finance the creation of Black music, starting from record deals that were terrible. There's not just say there's an example at the museum actually of a record recorded contract of an artist that if you go there and look at that artifact, you'll see some of the deal points, and that is not just 60, 70 years away. We're talking about also 20 years away with the creation, or maybe 30 years over, the creation of urban departments, right, that were underfunded in terms of marketing and recording and promotion. So the effort was still on the popularity and efforts of the artists who had very little budget, who still had to use grassroots strategies to promote their music. Even though it's a major label or major indie distribution, it still require leaning on the artist. So one of the challenges with urban music is you look at, again, not only does the term urban music, is it limiting, because urban is, again, like you said, city, but it's also, there's tons of different, sort of ways that we describe the term urban. It's used in ways to mean just black. It's used in ways to mean socioeconomically challenged or oppressed. It's used in all these different other contexts outside of music.
Right.
That is almost always negative. Right. So when we take this term that's used in other contexts outside of music, that's always negative, and then apply it to the music industry, well, then it makes sense that that's going to get the least budget in the label, less budget than the pop department and rock department. Even sometimes less budget than now with EDM departments. So now we're in 2022, and later in this summit, I'm going to talk about more stats in terms of the genres, black music genres. But now we're in 2022. So and now we're here, and we have artists like you mentioned, Justin Timberlake, Macklemore. I remember Macklemore coming out. I think he got Best Rap Artist of one year, and
how that album beat To Pimp a Butterfly, I'll never understand.
Right. So I think the conversation also is the cognitive dissonance around celebrating black music, but still the artists who create that music is not socioeconomically where they should be compared to their white counterparts who are actually performing that music. So how do we move that forward? I mean, one way, like one way I think is dismantling this idea of urban department, and therefore putting a spotlight on what the music truly is and where it comes from, but also institutions, right? So let's talk about, institutions, not only the major labels, major publishers, major indies, major DSPs, but what other type of institutions are helping to move forward black music today in 2022?
Man, I think social media. Honestly, I think just the power being in the hands of the creator these days. It's just decentralizing that power or the limitations that have been put on the music, and again, just to my earlier point, you don't have to be black to do black music. That's the beauty. So that's the thing, is embracing it. And really, when we open it up, when we say, hey, Adele, really, if you were black, you'd be Jennifer Hudson. Let's keep it real. Sam Smith, if you were black, you'd be Ruben Studdard. Like, keep it real. Like, and I'm just saying, like, they marginalize you too. So that's the thing, is that allowing people to see themselves in what they do. Like, I'm sure Justin Bieber would be proud to say that he does R&B, but we won't allow him to say that. So that's the thing. I think it's beautiful. I think social media is one of those things that's decentralizing that, and it's allowing people to see themselves reflected in the music, and not being limited by these tags, by these labels, if you will. Outside of the institutions that you named, outside of labels, and everything that comes with that, and these publishing companies. And understand, like, these are boxes that were created for that reason. Their budgets for the boxes, like, they finance the box. So that's the thing. If you want to fall into one of those boxes, then that's what it is. But that's, if you do something different, or if you are white and do black music, that's fine. But I think we're at a time in history where I think it's time to say that, and it's okay to say that. And I think that's what helps grow it. And by the same token, it's okay to be black and want to do white music. You know what I mean? It's okay to want to be black and want to do full on rock, and to do country as we know country. That's what it is, as far as we know country, because, like I said earlier, country and blues are mirror images of each other. So that's why it's been that way. That's why you knock on the door, they're not letting you in. No, man, this is not your house. Blues is your house. Get over there. No, I want to be over here. So it's just a new day. And I think that social media is allowing for us to see that not only are there people that are interested, in not maintaining status quo, but listening audiences are the same way too.
Yeah, and I think, for me, it kind of, it reminds me of just the first black record label, Black Swan, and why it was created. It was created to allow African Americans to go about their art in their way. And so I think I think one of the things that absolutely needs to happen is for us to build more spaces where people feel comfortable packaging themselves and packaging their art in the way that they feel best expresses that. And I think that if we can do that, we'll see, I mean, like our biggest artists of all time have done it their way. Like, I mean, Prince, looking at Beyonce and even her new song that she just dropped, Fire. But it's taking the route of, I want to express myself in my way, and I can still do it to the same beat. I can still do it to the, I can hit your BPM for, radio or whatever like that, but I can still give the message that I want to give. And creating more spaces where we allow Black people to use music to share their living experience. At the museum, we look at music and we teach and talk about music as a primary source for kind of what's going on, of research for what's going on in the Black community, what's going on with Black people. And so if we package it too much or try to make it too cookie cutter to fit in a certain box or genre, then you lose some of the authenticity of that source. And so that's what I believe we can do, is to create more spaces. And I mean, we've kind of seen it happen with kind of the rise of independent artists, independent labels, and even if they have partnerships and things like that. But people are looking for those spaces where, this is the art I want to create. Help me create it and help me share it with the world. Don't put me into this box or this cookie cutter model.
And you know what, real quick to add on to what he said, just about just the power of and that's something we're going to touch on in a little bit in the panel that I'm moderating, but just the power coming back to the creator, the power of independent labels. Understand, and going back to how we got here, one of the ways we got here in terms of losing power, you got to understand, at one point, Motown was so strong, Motown was so cold that they created a law that said you can only have a certain number of songs by the same label on a chart. So Motown had to change the name of the label, like Stevie Wonder, they had to put on Tamla, I think, because otherwise it would have been Motown straight up and down the chart. So they had to create these subsidiary labels so it wouldn't be Motown all the way up and down the chart. What's happening now is the power is coming back. That's why I'm really interested in you guys hearing from Derek Minor in a little bit, because he's a creator, but he's also a record label owner. And he's very knowledgeable about what he's doing. And so that's the difference now. Back then you were the creator, but you'd have a Berry Gordy. So now you got somebody like Derek Minor that is Smokey Robinson and Berry Gordy in one. So that's what's amazing about the times. And I think that's I think that's where we go from here. I think that's how the power of the narrative is reclaimed.
I think you can make an excellent point. Today we have technologies that just didn't exist 100 years ago. So when we talk about the emergence of rock and roll, the covering of Black music by white artists in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, but specifically in that kind of 40s to 60s area, now we have tools, credit, right? We have metadata services that are powering the streaming platforms that enable people to click into a song and see who's behind that song, who wrote it, who produced it. That's power and knowledge, right? As we start to continue to expand on that, right? Now you have credits that are showing up in studios, and make sure you go back there and check out Sound Credit, by the way. You have credits and being able to draw a line in terms of this artist is influenced by this artist. You have platforms like Who Sampled that gives you this deep dive into a recording that was sampled by that sampled another recording, that sampled another recording. I was looking at one the other day that I believe was DJ Khaled, and the recording has sampled a Carlos Santana song, which has sampled a Wu-Tang song, which has sampled another song from the 20s. Like it kept going deeper and deeper, deeper, all the way to the point where you can see how the influence from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s is showing up today in today's music. And how do we appreciate and highlight those creators? We talk about, in the last 15 years, probably 20 years, there's really been this kind of resurgence of traditionally, pop white artists being stood up by Black creators in the studio. the producers, the songwriters, your Pharrells, your Timberlands, they're in there creating the music, but not all the producers and songwriters have that type of brand recognition. There's a lot of independent creators, songwriters who wrote on a song, who wrote the hook or who contributed to a work and just did not get that type of visibility. And that's another whole conversation around tokenization I want to dive into at some point. But now that we have these tools, especially around credits, we have to make sure that we are highlighting those creators and showing those contributions. And it's not just that someone's song. Today is not just, Sam doesn't go out and steal someone's song from somewhere else, but the influence is coming from the community, and it looks different than it in the 40s. It was literally, I'm gonna steal this race record and put a white band on it and redo the whole song, and that's it, right? We're gonna just steal the music in terms of covering it. Now it's different. We're hiring the producers, right? But we also dive into the deal terms, right? Buyouts are bad. Not getting ownership. You mentioned, as an artist today, you can have your own label. You can have your own publishing company. You can own your copyrights, which you couldn't do 100 years ago, or even 60 years ago. So we have a little bit more power in the hands of the creators, right? Hold on to your copyrights as long as possible. Be able to create your own entities so that your entity shows up on the screen when you look at Spotify or Apple Music, and you're able to go into negotiations with labels and publishers better when you have some data around your actual copyrights, because the value of it. You're not just I don't know what the value of my copyrights is, so I can't negotiate in advance because I don't know anything about my own data. So I think using those tools give us power, right? Understanding those tools and how they impact your business, but also how they highlight and showcase creators.
Absolutely. You just made me think about something too. Something you said about creators and, just embracing the source of that creativity. A lot of us, I'm sure, know Mike Hicks. Hicks said something on the panel one time that was really, really eye-opening for me. But, it was just really interesting because he said the first time he did a major country session, he's called in to play keys and do his thing. And he said that producer was like, okay, he told everybody what they wanted, but he got to the drummer. He said, do something Timberland-ish. Like, what you mean? Like something Timberland would do, like do something Timberland-ish. And he said that he remembered thinking, well, why don't you just call Timberland? That's the thing. Stop that. Just call it. Just call that person to do that thing. And that's okay. You'd be okay to say, do something Latin. Do something make this more of a Latin feel. You'd be okay to say that. You get to the point where you're just as comfortable saying, do something Black right there. And it's okay. That's not offensive. Do something indigenous to you, authentic to you. Do that thing. Don't try to get around that. Call a thing, and it's okay. It's not offensive. I just had to put that out. While we're talking about Black creativity and being Black creators in the room, that's something we have to get past, is that it's okay. Ask me to be Black. If that's what you call me for, then let me show up and let me be that, because that's the thing you call me to do. So call a thing a thing.
All right. I think if there are any final thoughts on how we got here before we dive into, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to dive into our first panel. But any final thoughts or words?
No, I mean, just for me, I mean, again, as we get ready to celebrate 50 years of hip hop, I think if we look at the life of hip hop, we can see so many similarities between just Black music as a whole. And I think that next year is a moment for all of Black music to celebrate. Because I firmly believe that hip hop is one of those genres that brings us all together, because of samples, because of different influences, because of the versatility of hip hop. We can learn a lot from hip hop, from how it started to where it's become, to where it's gotten now, how it's grown, in spite of, again, the contextual struggles. Even my mother to this day still calls it jungle music. But it's, and she's, my mother's Black, but she is in love with gospel and things like that. And so hip hop to her was jungle music. But I think that the power that hip hop has displayed in these past few years, and that it continues to display through its growth, through its impact and influence, is something we all can learn and take a piece from.
Yeah. I say, just to build on what he said, that's the beauty of hip hop. Hip hop is really culmination of all of these American art forms and beyond. The beauty of hip hop is that it allows, although it was something that was created by Black people, everybody's able to see themselves reflected in it. That's the beauty, because the thing that makes hip hop is samples. What are you building upon? So you might build upon, like, here comes a Rick Rubin. You know what I mean? Rick Rubin, and he's one of the foundational creators of all of hip hop. Some of the records he made, you think back to the Beastie Boy records and some of the Run DMC records he made, and you had electric guitar, heavy rock influence, Aerosmith. That's the beauty of hip hop. You'll sample a Latin record. You might sample an old soul record. You might sample a jazz record, somebody like Nas, heavy jazz influence. That's the beauty of hip hop. And then you interpret it for yourself. But it takes all of that in and calls it hip hop. It brings all of it in and makes it its own some kind of way. So that's the beauty of it. So as we celebrate it, hadn't really thought about it, man, like that until you said it. But that really is the beauty of hip hop, is that it takes everything in, and hip hop itself doesn't discriminate. So looking forward to celebrating the year hip hop.
Yeah, I actually want to add to that and close this up. I just spent several months in Latin America, as you know, and 3 of those months was in Colombia, and going into literally the mountains that were almost detached from the major city of Medellin. They had to build an elevator in the mountains in order for the poor to come down into the city and be able to interact and get jobs and buy things. But when you go up into Communal 13, which was this part of the city that was ravaged by the guerrilla wars and the drug wars, it's all Black Colombians. And on the walls is graffiti everywhere, and murals of hip hop. And there's kids breakdancing and dancing or rapping in every little corner when you're walking through, because they're using hip hop as a tool to get the youth a bridge into basically a more productive life and away from the history of that area, which really was drugs and violence. But they're using hip hop as a tool. Communal 13, if you ever get down to Medellin. And around the world, hip hop is used as a way to express and politically express against whatever is going on at the time in those areas. So I think I think there will be some incredible things happening probably around November during the National Hip Hop Month to really celebrate what started as an art. It was a political art, and what still today is a tool to really create stability, even in an area that the kids don't even speak English; they speak Spanish. Right. So you're talking about not only is we're using hip hop, but it's also in multi languages.
I think in closing, we just all agreed that on August 11th, we all should have like a happy birthday or birthday party for hip hop. That's what I think. That's kind of where we settled at.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and take a quick break. The next panel is gonna be on 11:15. So if you get a chance, jump over in the conference room, check out Sound Credit as well as MLC table. If you're not a member of the MLC, definitely check out the MLC table. The restrooms are over there. There's some snacks and beverages right here. We'll be back at 11:15.